Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Kieran Collins and Ruairi Walsh. Lads, how are things?
Good, Mark. Yourself?
Great, Mark. Thank you.
Great stuff. Good to have you back, Ruairi. I suppose this week, guys, let's have maybe a review of the National Allianz Hurling League, 1A, 1B and 2A, round 2 in the books. We'll also look at the Ashbourne Cup final. I know we touched upon it last year. University of Limerick emerging victorious. We'll also look at Fitzgibbon Cup semi-finals played during the week, and also the schools, the All-Ireland quarter-finals around this weekend. I suppose first off, maybe we can talk here, Ruairi, about the Ashbourne Cup final. You were at it. I know you have association with the University of Limerick camogie team, and they certainly pulled out a magnificent second half performance to beat TUD on Sunday. I suppose, get your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, the venue, the Connacht Dome, was, a fitting venue. It was my first time up there. It's pretty spectacular, especially this time of year, with the way the weather has been, and just being able to play on a perfect surface. So yeah, that was the first thing I noticed about it. UL started off first half. I think they were up 8-9 points early in the game, and then TUD had their best spell. Really came back at them in the second quarter, and it was only a point in there at half time. And similar to the first half, UL again set the tone. Blistering start to the second half with a number of goals. Mairead O'Brien in this spell, she's a Waterford senior, chipped in with 2-1 during this purple patch. And at this stage, they weren't going to give up that lead again, and held on, and in the end won by 13-14 points to finish. So thoroughly deserved champions, and it was great to see happen after last year's fiasco with the score difference. And I thought it was quite fitting at the end that Hilda Breslin's last act as camogie president was to hand the Ashbourne Cup to UL, especially after everything that happened last year with the Camogie Association and so on.
No, absolutely. Emma McGrath as well, Ruairi, 2 goals, 3 points. I mean, magnificent effort as well.
Emma McGrath, brilliant. Casey Hennessy all over the field as well. Alva Larkin midfield as well. They were talking before about spreaded players like UL have Sarah Shanahan from Offaly. They had players from Waterford, 2 or 3 Waterford seniors, Tipperary, Clare, Anya Keane from Galway centre back. Just a real spread. So yeah, they're kind of fortunate. Even the substitutes they brought on, Lorna McNamara and Quiva Lyons, are both senior intercounty starting forwards. So to be able to bring them in off the bench, really gave them a boost near the end. And a kind of where in the first half they kind of had that lag coming up to, let's say, second half of the first half, that wasn't going to happen in the second half because they had this power coming in off the bench. And it's something I know the management, Declan Nash and Denny Ferncombe, Derv Legan have spoken about. Just having that, the luxury of having a really strong bench, and it does in a situation where you're playing a semi-final on a Saturday and a final on a Sunday, it does really count. And I know the UCC game was very tight in the semi-final, and in a way extra time would have made a huge difference there with only a 24-hour recovery. So UL got the last 2 points in injury time in that game to just get through in it. So yeah, as you said, Emma McGrath, serious free taker. One of the famous McGrath family, John and Noel being her brothers. So a lot of these girls, I think maybe 10 of them were there last year from the starting team. About 10 of them were there last year and would have maybe had that hurt driving them on. I know management spoke about kind of parking last year to one side, and that is the right thing to do. Just focus. This is a new year. You had new players in first year. You can't be kind of harping back onto what happened. But I'm sure it just made it extra special though for them at the end when they won it.
Absolutely, Ruairi, and I suppose for yourself as well, being involved with them last year, I mean, must have been great scenes afterwards in final whistle. So look, heartiest congratulations to the University of Limerick camogie team. That's an outstanding victory. And look, we'll touch upon the Fitzgibbon Cup as well, because University of Limerick will be in that final, but we'll touch upon that later. I suppose, Kieran, might come to you. I mean, next on the agenda is round 2s in the books in the Allianz Hurling League. 1A, 1B, 2A. I suppose we'll start with 1A first, and I won't start with Cork Kilkenny first. I'll start with Wexford Offaly game down in Chadwick's Park. I mean, the conditions are horrific, but there was plenty of subplots during this game. Kieran, I suppose 13-man Wexford managed to salvage a draw. I suppose, get your thoughts.
I suppose maybe it's a game that people might have predicted Wexford for a bigger win, coming into the league, and I suppose it's maybe a game that they might have seen as an easy 2 points, but I think awfully shown that that wasn't the case. I think they really started so strong, and I suppose the time, especially in that first half, I think they bullied Wexford all over the field. Was their biggest letdown maybe might have been shot selection and some poor wides, and especially from frees. But credit to, I suppose, to Duignan. He's not their number one free taker. Owen Cahill is, and he's out injured. So I suppose that's been a huge factor. But really impressed with Offaly, and they're like a team that they've a lot of. They're physically they're there. They've a lot of work done, and I suppose it's great to see. That's for them getting. I'm sure that after looking back, they're probably regrets, and that they had the 2 points in their grasp. But I think for them it's a satisfying evening that they can mix it with a top tier team or a Liam McCarthy team. It just shows, I suppose, we're not that far away. There's we know we've been well documented over the last couple of years. The work has been done, and Michael Duignan and and so on, and Shane Lowry backing him as well. And I think they're starting to see some fruits of that work now with that old grey under 20 team that we've seen last year, and the minor, they were all minor the year before. They haven't really been started. I suppose Charlie went to the side. Adam Screeney obviously started as well, but there's still a few more of them to come into that mix as well. So look, I suppose it's all pointing in the right direction for them. I suppose they're really impressed with just their work rate. Their intensity, and I suppose it's like a game that they kind of set out to target. It was chalk and cheese to their performance against Waterford the week before. When you see them in the first half sending off puckouts, not contesting, it was a different attitude last Saturday night. Horrendous conditions. I suppose from a Wexford point of view, really didn't hurl well in that first half. Don't think they were let hurl well. They weren't given their own way. But I suppose credit to them. I suppose battling back to go 3 points up. I suppose in late into that second half. I suppose we've all seen the red card for Jack O'Connor. It's been all the clips on Twitter and that during the week, and that's part of it. And then I suppose Charlie McGuckin late on getting the card, but I suppose you'd have to credit them to not throwing the towel in. Kept fighting, late Seamus Casey point, and probably a chance at the end to win it as well. Simon Donoghue put it wide, and if you really look at the replay, Cahill Dunbar was inside on his own in space, but look, it's you're not going to criticise. He got the ball where he was, and he had to go. So look, I suppose for both teams, they'll probably, I suppose, Offaly, I imagine, would have regrets, but I think for Wexford, look at. Definitely a dip in performance on the previous week's games they played, but I suppose the fight was still there, and they kept it going till the final whistle.
Yeah, get you in there, Rory. I suppose myself and Kieran on last week, I think we were kind of looking to see the likes of the Screenies come in, but I mean, must be a very pleasing performance here for Johnny Kelly. It's something that they can build on for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and to be honest, the Leinster Championship does need an Offaly coming back getting strong again, because it had been coming 3 out of 4 teams for the last few years, so there's good promising signs there. All set, it is early in the year, and when the pitches get hard or whatever, it'll probably tell us a bit more about where Offaly really are. But yeah, interesting. Wexford had 10 different scorers the last day, and maybe in the past few years there maybe a bit of an over reliance on Lee Chin and Rory O'Connor, but it's good to see a good spread of scores there. I wonder, will Keith Rossiter be slightly worried, like with, let's say, big performance against Kilkenny, and not to belittle Offaly in any way, but let's say they were a team that was in Christy Ring final last year, that maybe performance dropped slightly, a bit like last year Leinster Championship, where beating Kilkenny one week and then we had the defeat with Westmeath. Is there a bit of an up and down thing, or maybe I'm just misjudging the performance of Offaly here and not being fair to them? Because it is something, maybe there's a level of consistency that Wexford maybe need to find between now and Leinster Championship. Because as we said, they seem to be well able to perform when it's Kilkenny. Maybe hypnotise that they're playing Kilkenny every week and get that best out of them. But it maybe is something for Wexford on the horizon. Offaly, again, as I said, they've started the league quite well. Like going down to Wexford Park and putting Wexford to the pin of their collar. And even before the first red card, they're well in the game. And I know that obviously the 2 red cards were going to be an impact over the 70 minutes, but even before that, they were well in the game and leading for large chunks of it before the red card. So as we said, it's still, though, it's hard to see. Like, they're going to be playing Cork now, who are fighting for their lives, and it could come down to Clare might need a win last game as well, depending on how the Wexford game goes for Clare in the meantime. And so it could still be tough for Offaly to stay up there, and it's hard to see, especially with 3 teams going down. They have 2 defeats now. Well, 2 teams definitely going down, and the 3rd team in the playoff. So it is looking like they might slip back down, but at least they're showing a bit of fight and they're showing a bit of competitiveness.
Yeah, certainly, Rory. I mean, that opening half for Offaly, I thought was very impressive. Something that John Milan on commentary on radio was very quick to praise. I mean, the 14 wide stuff for Offaly were kind of a killer for him. I think the shot selection, you said, Kieran, I think it was a little bit way off. But, I mean, all credit to Wexford. I think the resilience, particularly when they were down to 13 players, other teams may have thrown in the towel on a wet, horrendous night in Chadwick's Park, but they didn't. So, I mean, live to fight another day. I suppose, guys,
I think as well, Mark, just one point, just as Rory was making there on the performance. I suppose this time of year it's so hard to know. Like, it's been a long couple of weeks on the road between Walsh Cup. Then you have the distraction of Fitzgibbon for a certain amount of players as well. And I suppose, look, a lot of teams are getting in heavy training loads as well. So I think a lot of teams will look forward to a week's break this week. It's been a long couple of weeks on heavy ground as well. So, I suppose it'll remain to see whether it was an attitude or a mental block that, led to that poor performance in the first half, especially. But I suppose, it has been a tough few weeks as well. And, there's a lot of work ongoing, and, the heavy ground and Fitzgibbon all combined, it's a huge workload on certain players.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you, Kieran. A well overdue week off for the Intercounty Hurlers. I suppose, guys, the televised game on RTE on Saturday night saw Cork play Kilkenny in Super Value Park at Kiev. No, Kieran, we touched upon this last week in terms of the collapses, particularly third quarter, but this happened in the opening half this week, or last week, Kieran. I suppose Pat Ryan's kind of deflecting any relegation concerns, kind of saying he's going to kind of play his hand in terms of the panel. But again, this opening half performance for Cork is not going to get it done when it comes to championship time. Yeah,
we talked about the comparisons you could make to Cork last year, and I suppose the same things remain. Like obviously last week, third quarter against Clare, just not in it. From the off, they weren't in it. The 2 points scored in the first 20 minutes. And at that stage it was 10-2 to Kilkenny. I'm not sure was it Kilkenny were good, but did Cork make them look better than what they were? Cork literally did not lay a glove on them in that period. They did finish the half strong, I suppose, with scoring 1-3 to get them back into it. I suppose Cork at times guilty of, I suppose, wasteful shooting, and I suppose a lot of bad decision making as well. But it's such a hard to put your finger on it, like how they can go from being that out of the game to, I suppose, they get in their purple patch and get them back into it. But and I suppose, look, at the end they had chances to probably go and win the game, only for a late John Donnelly point. I suppose last week we questioned, does Horgan need to be playing this time of year? The Conor Lehan, we all know what he can do. Kingston the same. I know, like, is it time to put some faith and trust in younger guys? Like, these guys have no fear. There's no baggage with them. I feel as well, like, if Harnedy was fit, would he be playing as well? I think Sean Toomey, really, really impressive, and I think he's there to stay. Like Kieran Joyce as well, like he's just growing into that number 6 role, and he's really, really impressive, really strong. Look, Mark Holman getting back on the field as well is great after being out all last year. I suppose the one concern is Robbie O'Flynn, that hamstring injury again, and I suppose the news during the week was it's not good. He's having a hard run of it, and he was a player showing such good promise there, in early last year. Cork, Pat Ryan can play down relegation all he likes. They're 0 from 2. Okay, they have Offaly to play in that and a way through to Wexford, but I suppose the fate is in their hands still. Win your last 3 games, but the pressure has to be on. I know the league isn't the be all and end all, but it's for maybe not thinking of next year yet, but it's when it comes to next year and that competitive games and all this, we know how in the red they are regarding Super Value Park and Creek Park, and the gate receipts will not be the same if they're playing in 1B than it would be in 1A. The traction isn't there, so just still huge question marks over Cork. I think even their puck outs, they're over reliant to the short puck out, and I'm willing to play it even when the opposition are pushed up on them. It seems to get sort of in all sorts of trouble. Some of the distribution and delivery for Patrick Collins is probably questionable. Will they give Brian Saunderson a go in goals? There's still the same question marks, the same things we talked about Cork last year. We're still talking about them.
That's a bit of a worry, Rory, isn't it, for Cork? I mean, Pat Ryan's second year in charge. You'd feel there would be an evolution here in terms of game plan, but certainly hasn't happened.
Yeah, and it's definitely worrying. I think if you're a Cork fan, you want to see progress and see that there's, another step on the line after last year's Munster Championship. And let's remember, they weren't far away in Munster last year, and there was definitely an improvement on the previous year. But it's just the style of play, I think, as Kieran was saying, was a bit baffling at times. They were over and back across the pitch in the first half. There was no real bite or directness to what they were doing, and kind of played into Kilkenny's hands a bit. And second half, when they kind of did launch the ball a bit quicker, you could see Pat Horgan was winning frees inside. The Kilkenny full back line were in a bit of trouble with quick ball, but you just wonder, like, whatever about players being trialed in and out, it's the style of play really should be, the players should be slotting in to the style the county want to play. And yeah, there was a bit of like crossfield ball, too much crossfield ball in it. I think it was a few years ago, Father Harry Bohan, the parish priest in 6 Mile Bridge, was asked by a Cork fan, Father, what is up with Cork? And he said, well, I wouldn't be too much into the modern hurling, but most teams play the ball down the field. Cork play the ball across the field. I thought of that comment when I was watching them the other night. But as Kieran said, like, there is still, like, Sean Toomey performed well. Tommy O'Connell midfield, I thought, was very good. What I liked about him was when Kilkenny were well on top, he was the one Corkman that was taking the battle to them. And just with Mark Coleman coming back, I think that could be very interesting if they both are a midfield pairing, like Tommy O'Connell and Mark Coleman are midfield that would get forward and score. But look, forward line worries me a bit with Cork. Like, where is Ben Cunningham and Dermot Healy and these lads from the under 20s that showed so much promise last year? If anything, I thought they'd be blooded in now during the league. Maybe that's the plan over the last 3 games, but kind of going back to I wouldn't even say tried and trusted, but guys that have been blowing hot and cold. We mentioned that in the first week of the podcast. And I think if you were a Cork fan that's over the last 10 years watching some of these forwards and losing faith in them and just seeing them go back to them again, when there is younger talents coming through, it's just a small bit baffling. Kilkenny as well, like, I think everybody focused on how poor Cork were, but Kilkenny, after having such a good start, like, they went completely out of the game. And take Adrian Mullen out of their team, scored 5 points from play, and take him out, and they were in big trouble as well. And again, I know, look, and Kieran alluded to as well, we don't know where teams are at in terms of what kind of a week's training was put on board. A lot of teams are looking further down the line. But I suppose the fact Kilkenny looked so sharp and early on and worked the ball so well when Cork gave them space. Like, there was 2 or 3 scores Kilkenny got where Cork didn't lay a glove on them. I don't think there was a Cork man within 5 metres of the Kilkenny player. And it was only in the second half or near the end of the first half, when Cork started to close that space, that some of the Kilkenny lads, look, their touch did look a bit off under pressure. Striking looked a bit off for 1 or 2 players. And it's just still one question mark I have with Kilkenny. Like, they've gone for big physical athletes in their team, and it's a surprising thing to say, but some of them, I still think some of their hurling and certain players, especially in the backs, their striking can be a bit erratic and not as crisp enough as you see from Limerick, and that's probably where the difference is at the minute.
It's a good job you referred to Adrian Mullen there. It seems to be Adrian Mullen that's a fully fit player, and Kieran coming in with 5 points. Obviously, Owen Cody had a point to prove after Fitzgibbon Cup quarter final. He chipped in with a few scores. John Donnelly as well, starting the year strong. So, I mean, for Derek Ling here, I think an awful lot of positives here in terms of those 3 players.
Absolutely, yeah. But they're the same 3 players that you'll be mentioning last year as well, Mark. You know what I mean? So I suppose Billy Drenning came on as well. He got 3 points, 2 from frees. And I suppose, look, the main thing is he's contributing every day he comes on. Still probably has a bit to prove in open play. Thought we might see a little bit more of him this year. I'm talking he might get a start especially with TJ not playing. I think there's a lot of promise maybe last year with him when he came on the scene. But look, yeah, Kilkenny, you know what you get with him. And as Rory said, they did go out of that game in the second half, and Cork did boss it. And I suppose in the end, Kilkenny were lucky to scrape the win, and I suppose Cork would feel that the game was there for them.
I suppose we quickly go to Walsh Park. It was the homecoming for Waterford. I mean, Walsh Park looked magnificent on the telly, but Rory, Clare, Gay crashed the party, and I mean the panel players again impressing. Brian Lohan has a few headaches here in terms of selection going into the bye week.
Yeah, and look, it's good to see a bit of depth there, because like you're looking at like he, apart from bringing on Shane Meehan, he rested all the other lads still in Fitzgibbon, which I think was an important thing to do. Kieran alluded to heavy pitches this time of year and just the risk of injury and all that goes with it. But again, look, Aidan McCarthy kind of became a bit of a forgotten man because he started the Munster Championship in blistering form last year, picked up a knock that kind of like sidelined him for the rest of the championship. So great to see him come back in and contribute as well. So yeah, from a Waterford point of view as well, like you could tell they were probably targeting this game, get that win at home, opening a Walsh Park. But remember, Waterford missing a lot of players as well. So there was a huge element of shadow boxing, if you will. And but I'm sure Brian Lohan will be delighted. 2 wins out of 2, and it gives him a luxury of maybe looking at a few guys. I think it worked out well too with John Conlon coming back because Jeremy Ryan obviously was rested wing back with Mary I still going, and because sometimes with a player you want to have a look at them in the league and just see are his fitness levels and match sharpness up where they should be from last year and previous years. As we know, like he had a busy year this year with Clonlara and he has a lot of miles on the clock. So I think getting to see John Conlon in action was probably a plus for Lohan, because I'm sure maybe the intent from the start was to give him most of the league off, but I think playing him probably was the right thing to do. So another player who looked in real form is Ian Galvin inside in the first half, looked really sharp. A surprise he was taken off as early as he was the second half. Again, don't know what the plan is there, but he definitely caused the Waterford backs huge problems inside. And saying that from a Waterford point of view, Sean Walsh there for the goal, Conor Cleary was turned really easily, and there was a question of steps or whatever, but still, I thought he took the goal very well, Sean Walsh, for a lad, making his debut and an established kind of full back. But that was kind of the one maybe worrying thing from Clare. The full back line did look a bit exposed at time, but again, very early in the year, and 2 wins out of 2, Lohan will be delighted.
Clare fairly dominant in that second and third quarter here, Kieran, and I mean 10 different scores for Clare. I mean, like Rin, Ian Galvin, as Rory has said, guys are really putting up the hand here for selection going in deep into the hurling league, and that's all you really want if you're Brian Lohan and the senior management.
I was really impressed with Sean Rin. Thought he went through an awful lot of work around the middle there, and a big guy, tough guy for a young guy, and I think we're going to see a lot more of him as the years go on. Clare, I suppose they are finding players. I liked McInerney as well as Rory's centre back last week. I suppose you're adding or looking at viable options if the likes of Conlon is injured, and I suppose we saw that in years gone by where Conlon was that semi-final against Kilkenny where before the game he went down, and I suppose that was a big factor for him. But there seems to be a lot more in reserves, and I suppose getting the game time into him now in the league, and I suppose it's important for him. And I suppose another Achilles heel over the years might have been free taking, and to have 2 good free takers in Rodgers and Aidan McCarthy as well to rely on. It's very important in today's game. I suppose for Waterford then, a lot of guys injured. Sean Walsh, I thought he was impressive, even aside from the goal in open play. Stephen Bennett going off injured. We've read in the last couple of weeks he's problems with his hips and that, and I suppose the talk is that he's kind of patching himself together and hoping to get a lighter workload and hoping to get through the year. So hopefully it's not too serious for him. Shane Meehan still has to light it up for Clare, Rory, doesn't he? Like he's never come in and scored more than 1 or 2 points. I suppose you've been talking about him the last year or two, but he's yet to impress me for Clare. I know he was impressive for Mary I last night, but from in the Clare jersey, so far, like he's a little bit to go. Do you think? No?
Yeah, and do you know what? We actually had this debate there just the other day with a couple of lads, and I was just saying he hasn't really been given a chance to start the game for Clare. It's kind of coming off the bench, 15 minutes to go in games. I presume Lohan sees his energy coming in as a big plus. I'd love to see him in with Rodgers because I think they're very different players. Like Meehan is kind of all action and likes to get on the loop of, let's say, centre forward, kind of likes to go out deep around on the loop, score point that way, whereas Rodgers is more a target man inside. I think they complement each other well, and they did play minor together. Now that was under 17s a good bit ago, and they were an excellent full forward line then. I know it's a few years on now, but yeah, I just feel that he hasn't really been given. I'd love to see him start a couple of league games and just from now on, and just maybe give him a chance to show what he can do from the start. But yeah,
we've seen it with Lohan, like we've seen it with Lohan, like with likes of player like Aaron Shanahan. You could even say David Reedy as well. Like even look over the last 2 years, you see Reedy in the league, and okay, he doesn't really get a chance to start, but when you do see him play, he's impressed at different stages, and you wonder does kind of Lohan have his select few that I suppose he trusts and relies on, and maybe that's why they're not getting start games. But I suppose it's just he's a player now. He's probably his third year in the panel, and you'd expect him to start making a stake in it at this stage.
Yeah, and it was 2 years ago actually when he first came on. I think it was against Limerick and Ennis, and got a couple of lovely scores, and we were expecting huge things from him last year. Now he has been slightly plagued with injuries, like niggly injuries as well, nothing major, but still, like this year he's kind of getting a clear run this year now, in through college hurling and in through early part of the league. So I think this year he really needs to step up, and when he does get his chance, like really nail it down. And from a Clare point of view, like let's say Tony Kelly is coming off a serious operation, we don't know. Fingers crossed everything will be well, but you just don't know if there'll be any delays or anything like that. So you're going through the league without him is a good thing, and that other lads have to step up. And one of those guys you'd imagine would be Shane Meehan, would have to come into reckoning if Kelly is to miss a round or two of the Munster Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, Clare with 10 different scores on the day. Waterford 1-8 from play. I know they had an awful lot of injuries, but I think that might be a huge sense of concern for David Fitzgerald and the management here as well. And I thought as well, Walsh Park, opening game, 3,900 attendance. I thought that was maybe a little bit low from a Waterford perspective, given the massive redevelopment work that was going on in the grounds here, Kieran. I mean, is that gauging something in terms of the Waterford public to this team?
Yeah, I think so, Mark. I've worked in Waterford a couple of days in recent times, and I suppose just general chit chat with guys, and I suppose what they've seen, and I suppose based on last year and maybe just the current management and the style of play, it's I think it's kind of not turned them off it, but it's it might be a factor in the low footfall, especially at the weekend. Against Clare, it probably would be one of the games in the league for Waterford. And these guys are going to face each other again in a couple of short weeks, so I'm not sure how it's been, how the style of play and management are being received under, I suppose, is what I can get gauged at the minute.
Yeah, I suppose that's for another day. I suppose one big, guys, quickly, Tipperary and Galway was probably the marquee headline game. Didn't fail to disappoint. Tipperary emerged 126 to 24 points winners over Galway in FPT Semple Stadium. Dublin got out of jail massively in Corrigan Park, 120 to 119 win over Antrim. And I know last week, Kieran, we'd asked Westmeath to set a foundation in terms of a performance. And I think they certainly did that here, Kieran, in terms of their performance against Limerick. 120 to 17 points, but all credit to Westmeath. They were in this right up until the final whistle.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Yeah, really, you suppose, real spirited performance, and I suppose they made Limerick fight for it, and I suppose they were so close. They need a late goal for Donegal Dálaigh really put the distance between them. A late 1-2 for Limerick with the distance between the two teams, and I suppose for Joe Fortune, without some of his main, I suppose the names we'd associate with Westmeath, Killian Doyle and Tommy Doyle not playing, I suppose for them it'll be easier to go training again this week after that performance. They've, as a team, I suppose over the last year or two, they've taken an awful lot of heavy beatings, especially this time of year. I think it'll make it a bit easier during the week to get back into into training. But I suppose that performance like that against the All-Ireland champions.
Yeah, no, I thought the work rate from minute one from Westmeath, they really did set the tone here, Kieran and Rory, and I mean the likes of Mitchell in midfield, that there was an awful lot of good incisive play in the middle third. I mean, Limerick got an absolute run out here in Mullingar, and look, I think John Kiley was probably quick to acknowledge the Westmeath performance, but also acknowledging a little bit in terms of the Limerick work rate here, a little bit to a certain degree. I suppose, Rory, looking at Tipperary Galway here, Gearóid O'Connor is probably the marquee headline here at 113, but I suppose what else stood out for you in that game?
Yeah, 113 and 5 points from play as well. It was a strange game in that a couple of times Tipperary looked like they had the upper hand and were going to maybe pull away, and Galway hung in there, and it wasn't until just the very end that late goal that kind of buried Galway for a finish. But it was like, again, I wouldn't say it was a reversal of what we saw in the All-Ireland quarter-final either last year, because Galway I didn't think Galway were quite full throttle. Tip at home, always kind of favourite to win this. And look, the thing is, Cahill has to find players. Like we saw that last year when it came to the crunch, like he hadn't really that bench to bring in. I know Billy Seymour and a few lads like that back in, and looking at Mary Ide, have a couple of very strong Tipperary players there, Hennessy, Joe Caesar, lads. I'm sure that Cahill is just maybe waiting to give them an opportunity. So like again, Tipperary are another team that weren't very far away. Like had they beaten Waterford at home, they were in a Munster final last year, and I think that's what maybe derailed their season. That game against Waterford last round. Up until then, like you're looking at, great victory against Clare up in Ennis, the draw with Limerick, the draw with Cork. Like they had 3 big performances put in there, and it just that defeat kind of did derail them. So I'm sure Cahill wants to get them back on track in the league again. Another step in the right direction for them. And they're a team I think that will want to be in around the business end of the league. As we mentioned it in the preview, just for Tipperary, it's almost like building confidence for them again, and getting to a league final and maybe getting some silverware might be just the bounce they might need going into championship.
And I think as well, Rory, they have the advantage of, it's always highlighted the 2-week break between league final and championship. They have that extra week as well on other teams, so I think it would suit them to go and win it. But for me, I think like Jake Morris and Brian O'Mara went off injured by 20-minute mark, and things still carried on the same. I suppose 2 big players really in that Tipperary team this time of year. I think Galway played in fits and starts. Like, Tip got a good lead earlier on, and they went 6 points up, but Galway scored 8 of the next 12 points. And again, the early second half, Tip went 5 points without response, and I think Galway came back at them. I think for me, I thought I was very disappointed with Nyland. Late on in the game, he 3 woeful wides, or when the game was there to be won for them. One of them was on 21, under no pressure whatsoever, and he put it wide. I suppose I'm not the biggest fan of Nyland and what I've seen over the last few years in open play. And, if that's championship and you've 3 great opportunities like that, you don't take them. Like, it's not good for Shefflin. And as I looked last week, I have been impressed with Tipperary to date. Gearóid O'Connor, like 3 man of the matches in a week. I suppose it shows the form that he's in. Mark Keogh, 3 points. Conor Bowe going back to wing back, and he looks like rejuvenated there. Really impressed as well with Owen Connolly there in the last couple of games, and Willie Connors midfield. But you add in Noel McGrath, Jason Ford, Cahill Barrett. They won't be too bad. I suppose this year is how they're going to bring that. We saw this time last year they were flying in the league as well. I suppose can they bring that into Munster this year? And if they do, like, how do you pick a 3 to come out of Munster if Tipperary and potentially Cork and Waterford have the levels up on last year? It's going to be rip roaring this year.
And Kieran, one that Keogh you mentioned there, just a player I thought a lot of, especially the year where Tip were really struggling. Mark Keogh was probably the most dangerous forward from play in the round robin 2 years ago. I thought last year he was going to take another step up, but I don't know that Cahill he didn't seem to be starting every game. Even here, still unsure of his place, but came in for Morris. I think it was after 20 minutes, and still 3 points from play. It looked a real threat. And even that day in the Gaelic grounds against Limerick, where Tip, everyone was expecting Tip's heaviest defeat of all time, and they put up a big performance that day under Bonner. And I thought Mark Keogh looked really sharp that day inside and was a real threat all through against a very strong Limerick full back line. So
I think though, Rory, the problem for me with Tipperary the last couple of years is I suppose consistency in that full forward line. You know, you look at Tipperary of old, and you've Bubbles and Shane McCann and Larry Corbett, all these guys. You know, they were like probably the best full forward lines in any team. But I think they struggle with consistency, especially with Jake Morris and possibly Mark Yo. And I suppose when it comes to and John McGrath as well, you know, last year's form. But if they can get them three guys firing into championship, you know, I think it'll be a different Tipperary team.
I suppose from a Galway perspective, I suppose the vibe coming out of it was probably the half-forward unit line really did struggle for long periods, and that was something that Henry Shefflin picked up on in terms of their work rate and intensity. I suppose the third quarter fight back, Conor Whelan got into it. Conor Cooney with 5 points from play as well. That there was some clever interplay there from him. And look, overall, I think Galway will dust themselves down. But again, as you say, you know, I don't think Galway, I think for key personnel, there was a bit of trial and experiment here with certain positions. But Keenan Fahey in the wing back position as well did provide an awful lot of upside as well. I suppose, guys, the Corrigan Park fixture, Kieran, we'd kind of targeted this for Antrim, and by God, they were close enough. And poor old Tiernan Smith, I mean, horrific error right at the end. You don't want that to happen to anyone, but such a vital stage of the game. And look, Dublin getting out of jail, really.
I think we predicted a draw on this one last week, but I suppose look at two teams that are struggling at the minute. Obviously, we know Dublin without Donald Burke and Owen O'Donnell and players like that. I really feel sorry for Antrim. Like, Dublin's great to win again last year in the championship up there, and they did it again last weekend. You know, the Tiernan Smith with the fumble the ball over the line. You know, really unfortunate at the time of the game as well. I was really impressed with Cunning again, scoring 110. You know, we know his ability. But like these two teams are struggling at the minute. I hope for like the likes of Dublin that they can get Burke. I think I heard again during the week that there was a setback in the injury, and you know, like if Dublin have to go into championship without Burke, you'd fear for him really, because they look a shell of the team. Obviously, see Chris O'Leary has stepped away as well. You know, we played midfielder from last year, ex-Cork player. While they are in a rebuild phase, you know, the personnel that are taking to the field, it's hard to see. Keane O'Sullivan probably, you know, the shining light at the minute there for him, maybe Brian Hayes as well. But, you know, they don't seem to have a 15, you know, a strong 15 at the minute. And I suppose we knew last year they were heavily reliant on Donald Burke. And, you know, I think for them, at all costs, they need to get him on the field along with Owen O'Donnell.
Yeah, but I think it's looking like a long road back for Donald Burke from what I'm hearing up in Dublin. Rory, I suppose from a Dublin perspective, you know, you take Tiernan Smith's own goal, 6 points from frees, 14 points in the 75, 76 minutes. I mean, that's not really going to get it done in championship. And I suppose Antrim as well, Cahill going with 110 as well. So scoring for both of these sides really looked very vulnerable going forward if this is going to be the trend.
Yeah, and they couldn't get a handle on Cunning at all, the Dublin backs. And you're just, you know, you're worried from a point of view where the Dublin are coming up against teams in Leinster that have 3 or 4 or 5 threats in the forward line. Like, they knew who was the player to mark, and still he got away with 1-3 from play and just caused havoc. What I loved about Cunning is he's one of these players that has a go at the cornerback, tries to get inside him instinctively, and you can see that with the goal. Like, and I know it was only, we saw a very small snapshot of highlights on RTE, but some of the scoring looked fantastic. Like, there was unbelievable scores in the game. Again, as Kieran said, must be heartbreaking for Antrim, because that's twice now they should have Dublin beaten league and championship up there. And the thing for them to do is just back it up now. Like, don't fall away in the league. Keep the performances coming, because it's something that's maybe happened before where Antrim produce a big performance one week and then fall away the next week. And, you know, they need to maybe keep this going. But the question is, where are Dublin? Like, for me, I think they've regressed badly in the last couple of years. We saw the quarterfinal last year against Clare and Gaelic Grounds. It was an absolute no-show, and you're just worried after all the kind of good work, and even as well, let's not be shy to say the GA pumped a lot of money into hurling coaching in Dublin and got hurling going in schools in South Dublin, you know, where it hadn't been popular before, and everyone thought for a while that Dublin were there to stay as a force, but there's really worrying signs now, and like, you wouldn't be surprised here if, like, Dublin struggle again. Like, they've Galway to play, Limerick to play, you know, Wexford, like, they could end up here without any win.
Limerick played Dublin in Croke Park in weekend after next. So that'll be an interesting acid test here for Dublin. Let alone the wide pitch in Croke Park now, but they're going to have to mix it with Limerick in terms of scoring stakes. So all to be revealed. 2A guys quite quickly. Down Kerry Saturday, down with a 223 to 119 win over Kerry. I mean, Conway's absent, but I know there was a stat thrown at League Sunday. 14 Kerry players have gone off the panel this year, and one of them, Tommy Goulden, had an absolute spectacular game for London against Wicklow, 3-11 in the league. Yeah, so I mean, here Ruairi, just in terms of Kerry, they've been knocking on the door here in terms of Joe McDonough, but I mean, the league form here, I know 14 players on any panel is going to be of grave concern, and it's kind of looking like that way, that this could be a kind of preserve your league status in 2A for Kerry.
Yeah, for a team that you would have thought, like, especially after last year's Joe McDonough campaign again, where they were very competitive, that they'd be pushing up, especially with the new format next year. They'd have been eager to get into that 1B category where you are facing some of the top teams. But it looks already that that's over after 2 games, and it is a question now of them staying in the level they're in, which will be the 3rd tier now next year. Because if they were to slip down, let's say to the 4th group of 7, like, they're going to be, playing against teams that are mostly Christie Ring below them, and they want to be playing at least Joe McDonough standard and a couple of Lee McCarthy teams. Laois got off to a good start in that group as well, and they have 2 wins on the board as of Carlow, so it's already looking that those 2 are kind of shooting ahead. So like, it's up to maybe Kerry now. Down had that big win over Kerry, that one of them was going to have to take out Carlow or Laois for them to maybe get into that top tier, or what was once the top tier, 1B.
Absolutely.
I think as well with Kerry, Mark, like they're actually leading at half time, 115 to 11. They were playing with a strong win, but only scoring 4 points in the second half. And I think it's to note as well as playing without Shane Conway, who was their talisman. But like, Down scored 2-5 without replying the second half, and that was game over. I think for Carlow have looked really, really impressive this year. Chris Nolan and Cavan again influential, and the 2-9 before half time to put them into a 10-point lead. And that game next weekend, Carlow Laois is going to be some humdinger for game, see who tops that group. And so it looks at the minute. Laois was didn't start the best. They were leading 14-13 at half time, but a really strong second half to see off Kildare, which it's hard to know where they are. We talked about them a lot last season, and especially in the league, and on the downfall after that. But the 2 teams, Carlow and Laois, seem to be way ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there, Kieran, because I know the Kildare Laois game, there was a strong gale blowing in Hawkfield. So, I mean, from a Kildare perspective, 1 point lead at halftime was never going to cut it against Laois. And in fairness to Laois, they did kind of ram it home with a few goals. It's true for you. I think it looks like Carlow and Laois here, and it's Laois Carlow next weekend, local derby game. Both jerseys, it'll be a good crowd there in Portlaoise anyway. But I suppose you're looking at Meath, Kerry, and Kildare here vying for relegation. Down might be the dark horse here. I was actually quite impressed with their 3rd quarter, because it was on BBC, Northern Ireland player anyway. And to be perfectly fair, the likes of Dahi Sands, Danny Toner, they've a nice middle third here. They did score fairly heavy in that 3rd quarter to really put the game to bed. And maybe that's a positive sign for 2A as well, that you have a competitive Down here that could potentially challenge Antrim long term here. I suppose, guys, can we move on to Fitzgibbon Cup semi-finals played last night in Dour Bearfield? I suppose it was a titanic struggle between University of Limerick and University of Galway. Killian Sampson, the hero here, Ruairi, 118 to 20 points for 14-man UL. Your thoughts?
Looking back over the game, UL had 15 wides, and at times, again, I thought Galway hung in there really well. At times when UL looked like they might kick on, but it took maybe Mark Rogers, who had a really quiet first half, came into it very strongly in the 3rd quarter, and that probably at the end made the difference. And fair play to Galway, brought it right back for everything. You thought it was going to go to extra time, and I'm sure Mary I would have been looking on gleefully had it gone to extra time. But in the end, that epic score from Sampson. And I presume the thing about UL now, it's 3 times in a row they've beaten Galway, twice in finals and now in the semi-final. And NUIG must be sick of the back of them, because 2 of those games could easily have swung NUIG's way. And I suppose at the start of the year, when people looked at panels and squads and were thinking of, looking at names on paper, it looked like UL were going to be way ahead of everyone, but hasn't transpired that way on the pitch. Very close game in the quarters against UCC. Galway put them to the pin of their collar, and if anything, Mary looked to be the team bouncing into the final with a bit of momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran, get you in there. I mean, probably sign of a quality team, though, when Adam English went off with the second yellow card, that they were able to kind of get the job done. I know University of Galway had a late chance to put this into extra time, but I suppose a win's a win. You move on to the final.
Yeah, like they're unbeaten post-COVID, UL. So, I suppose that winning mentality is there, and I suppose it is a sign of a very good team that, that regardless of performance, to still get the results. I think Rogers definitely second half was a real captain's performance, scoring 1-3, and, I suppose he was pivotal really. I suppose it shows the importance of a bench with Killian Sampson coming off, getting the last score. I suppose, look, UL started Fitzgibbon really strong first 2 rounds with, cricket scores, and I suppose UCC did put it to him. But will these 2 games, stand to them come a final, that they've been really battle hardened against 2 very good teams? Mary look really impressive, but, on paper, you would say UL, but they are still a good team regardless of the last 2 results and performances. So, there's nothing to say they can turn that around in a couple of days, and but it's going to be a rip-roaring final. I suppose looking at Mary their first final since 2019, 12 different scores, and I suppose they looked in control the whole game. Never at any period did it look like they weren't going to win. I suppose for one SCTU Waterford, Patrick Fitzgerald went off injured, and Padraig then with the 2 yellows went off. I suppose they're the 2 main guys in the team. In the quarter final they scored 110 between them. And yesterday they got a point between them. So I suppose it just shows how controlled Mary were that game. I suppose Shane Meehan, who we talked about earlier tonight, 1-3. Shane O'Brien with 3 points. I think Waterford probably relied on, Halloran's freeze, and I said they were never in control, and I suppose, look, it's going to be a very good final. Probably going to be, you'd have to say UL on paper, but, Mary had relished this challenge, and I suppose they've been improving week by week, and they're coming into it in very good form, so I think it's going to be a really, really good final, and it was a great weekend in Tralee if you were down around that way.
Yeah, absolutely, Kieran. I mean, I was very disappointed with SCTU Waterford's performance. I mean, never got to the pitch of the game here, Ruairi, and to be fair, the likes of Jason Gallan and goal, he thunderous point there in the first quarter really did set the tone. But I mean, 1-6 is not going to cut it, is it, if you're Waterford here to get into a final?
Yeah, and it's something Jason Gallan has been doing throughout this championship, is scoring these real long-range monster scores. Yeah, Waterford, they were disappointing. I think earlier in the year we kind of maybe named what we thought the 4 semi-finalists would be, and I just thought Waterford might put up a better challenge than they did. As I mentioned earlier, Mary are really bouncing into this final now, but I suppose you could say the pressure is on them. UL have their Fitzgibbon Cups, most of the players have their medals. This is a one chance for a lot of the Mary guys, in that there's a good few final year players in there. Jeremy Ryan I thought was immense as well. He's a lad, he's 3 or 4 years under his belt to Mary now, and he'd be mad to win the Fitzgibbon. And as Kieran said, Shane O'Brien inside looked really, really, on the ball. He's good in the air, he's striking left and right. For a big man as well, he's kind of an elusive guy to get a block on or a hook on, and then kind of an opposite side. We talked about earlier how Rogers and Meehan are kind of opposites. Well, so are kind of Shane O'Brien and Meehan, and I think they work well as a pairing inside. But from a Galway point of view as well, just come back, I thought Greg Thomas, Castlegar, was really good and gave TJ Brennan plenty of trouble inside. And I'm sure Henry Shefflin was watching the game closely and mad to kind of see anyone put up their hand, and I thought he looked a real threat inside. But getting back to the final, I don't know. I just have a sneaky feeling Mary here might turn UL over. It's only that the UL Galway game was more of a slog. I think it took more out of UL than what Mary did against Waterford. I know Dahi Lohan picked up a knock, had to come off, and they were saying just reading Jamie Wall there this morning was saying that it was a hamstring strain, but he was thinking he might be all right in 3 days, but I don't know, it'd be a miracle recovery for a strain to be fully right in 3 days. I think the game is fixed for Abbey-Dorney. I know Tralee are hosting, so up in North Kerry in a hurling stronghold. So I'm sure it'll intrigue the locals to have, the wealth of talent that's going to be there, and the fact it's 2 colleges that are 10 minutes spin from each other, and there'll be no love lost between either of them. And so it's an intriguing game. Really looking forward to it. Fair play to TG Cahir again, who have, put these games, streamed them on YouTube or whatever it is, just giving us, on a dark February Wednesday evening, a feast of hurling to watch. So again, at the weekend, fair play to TG Cahir. Yeah, and I'm just going to tip my hat to Ruairi and what should be a cracker.
Yeah, Kieran, get you in there. Who are you predicting that's going to win the 2024 Fitzgibbon Cup?
I think you just give full respect to UL. They're going for 3 in a row. They haven't won it the last few years for nothing. They're really strong on paper. They've had 2 very good, tests the last 2 rounds. I suppose I'm just out of pure respect to them, I'm going to tip UL, but I expect Ruairi to really, put in a huge performance. And I suppose we kind of called this maybe a couple of rounds out that, Ruairi were ticking along nicely and would have been a surprise package in a way, but you wouldn't have been too surprised if they got there either. And I suppose I'm not they have impressed all along. They probably wouldn't have been on many people's lips at the start of the year to reach the final, but they're there on merit, and I think I suppose they'll really have put a good performance in. And I suppose as Rory said, their colleges 10 minutes apart, it's going to be a rip roaring one. And I'm just going to stick with UL just based on 3 in a row, and I suppose going to make history, and there'll be I suppose a huge push on to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be a magnificent occasion. Let's hope the weather cooperates as well. It'd be lovely if it's a dry day down there in Abbey-Dorney, great hurling stronghold in North Kerry. I suppose, guys, before we leave senior schools, we're into the All-Ireland quarter-final weekend. Saturday we have Harty Cup winners Nina CBS facing Kilkenny CBS in Rathdowney, and then on Sunday in Dura Bearfield we have Ardscoil Reach against Presentation Athenry. I suppose, Rory, from your standpoint, where are the key battles here?
Yeah, you just worry a small bit from a Nina point of view that they're going into a game a bit like Tulla a couple of years ago, going in as champions and a free hit for Kilkenny CBS here. I think it was the other way around a couple of years ago. It was St. Kieran's who beat Tulla in the quarterfinal in Nina. So this time Nina, fresh off their victory, it's just a hard one to get yourself up again, because the Harty Cup is built up so much that when players win, it's hard for them to refocus, and maybe they could be a bit vulnerable going into this game against Kilkenny CBS. And the other game, again, Ardscoil Reach are in a situation where they've, come off a crushing defeat up against a fancied Athenry team as well, where Nyland has been kind of shooting the lights out. Although the last day, out of the 19 points they scored, he had 13, and there was a bit more of a spread of scores there. I know he missed a penalty in that as well, but maybe I'm going to go with Ardscoil Reach. That's probably the game that'll attract most attention, I think, because you're looking at a host of Galway minors there over this year and last year coming in that Athenry team, and as we know, kind of backbones by that Claren Bridge group who've been so strong underage. And then you have the Ardscoil Reach with kind of backed by a lot of the Clare minors that won the All-Ireland last year. The only thing I'd say is Nyland has been last year in the Ireland minor final, he was held, and you could see the Galway forwards were a bit miffed as to who was going to step up in that case. And you just wonder, I know I was saying there was a bit more scores, he still scored 13 points, missed a penalty, so you're wondering if Ardscoil Reach do hold him and kind of nullify his threat. I think they're halfway there to it, so I'm going to go Ardscoil and maybe a Kilkenny CBS shock in the other one.
Yeah, Kieran, get you in here as well. I feel this is a banana skin fixture for Nina CBS, as Rory's really pointed out brilliantly here. The highs of the Harty Cup final win, the dramatic win. Kilkenny CBS team last week that never were in the races. This is a proud hurling school, and I expect a massive performance off Kilkenny CBS. So for Nina, this is really kind of mind yourself territory here.
Yeah, I'm sure Kilkenny CBS have a point to prove as well. They really were a no-show in that final. Kieran's really dominated all over, and I'm sure that themselves, above anything else, they'd want to put in a performance and I suppose prove a point. Sometimes, like I suppose like Tulla a couple of years ago, Nina got to their Harty Cup, and are they happy with that? I suppose maybe the same pressure isn't on, that it probably will be on CBS, and I suppose at that point you might give the Kilkenny team the nod. I think the other game, Ardskull and Ashbourne, I suppose Ardskull will be hurting too, I suppose in a different manner to Kilkenny CBS. They would have felt that game was theirs. They let it slip away. Two really good teams, and I suppose they're two teams that you could see pushing on to the latter stages, and I suppose be potential winners. They're that good. Ardskull will be real, and I would expect that they would have enough to get over at Roy. I think that's going to be a really good game. So for me, I'm just gonna give Kilkenny CBS. They'll be looking for a real bounce back after that final against the Kieran's, and I think the same for Ardskull. They have both two teams have a point to prove to themselves above anyone else.
Yeah, no, I think, particularly the Ardskull game, if, as you say, Aaron Island is negated in any sort of fashion, I think Ardskull Reach do definitely have a point to prove. Same with Presentation. I mean, the Connacht final there, I think, was one that got away from Presentation. Definitely the goal chances that were spurned, particularly in that opening period, 3 of them. So, I mean, St. Raphael's were deserving winners, particularly in the second half. But I think Ardskull Reach here, they do have a point to prove. Doer Bearfield as well, not a clear contention, be fully familiar with that pitch. So I think from that perspective, I think Ardskull Reach. I think the Nina Kilkenny one might be the highlight quarter final here. I expect plenty of fireworks in Rathdowney on Saturday afternoon. I'm just going to hedge it to Nina, and I think it's not going to be much, but I think Darren McCarthy here is going to be another huge performance off him here. I think he's really showed so well in Harty Cup, and you just don't know what's Kilkenny CBS here. What's the psyche after that Leinster Schools final? I mean, it was a terrible loss, really, to St. Kieran. So, but look, they're going to bring their front foot. They have to, really. But I suppose Nina, it's wary. They've seen the Tulla CBS case study 2 years ago, so it'll be interesting because Ardskull Reach Presentation winners face St. Kieran's in a semi-final. And St. Raphael's await the winners of Nina CBS and Kilkenny CBS. So, I mean, look, we're kind of getting to the business end of the competition. So, wish all the teams best of luck. I suppose, guys, we'll leave it there. It's been a lengthy one tonight. I suppose next week we'll review the schools' quarterfinals on Saturday and Sunday of this week. We'll also look at round 3 of the National Hurling League, 1A, 1B and 2A. And we'll also look at the Fitzgibbon Cup as well. Obviously, Fitzgibbon Cup is going to Limerick, but will it be retained by University of Limerick, or will Mary Immaculate College secure their first crown in 5 years? Guys, enjoyed the games over the weekend. We'll chat next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, take care. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.